SpaceX didn't just break Roscosmos' decade-long monopoly. They made Russian cosmonaut Anna Kikina publicly admit that Crew Dragon is much more comfortable than Soyuz. How did a spacecraft built in just 6 years surpass one with nearly 60 years of heritage? On December 28th, Russia launched 52 satellites while their launch pad sits ready, yet they can't send their own cosmonauts to the ISS. Instead, they're depending on SpaceX Dragon, the very company they once ridiculed. What did Elon Musk's team get right that Russia couldn't? Let's dive right in. The launch pad sits ready. The Soyuz spacecraft is prepped. The rocket is fueled and vertical. Yet Roscosmos can only watch as their cosmonauts fly American. Why can't they use the same pad that just launched 52 satellites on December 28th? The answer reveals a critical design flaw. Vostochny Cosmodrome's launch pad lacks everything needed for human spaceflight. No crew access arm, no service tower, no launch escape system, and most critically, no certification for crewed missions. This isn't a temporary setback. It's a systemic bottleneck that's turned Russia from a spaceflight superpower into a dependent client. Here's what makes this ironic. Russia once charged NASA $90 million per seat while holding a complete monopoly on ISS access. Now they're the ones waiting for rides. And SpaceX, they planned for this exact scenario from day one. While Russia struggles with one inadequate launch pad, SpaceX operates two, LC-39A and SLC-40. This wasn't luxury, it was strategic foresight. What happens if one pad needs maintenance? What if an emergency requires two simultaneous launches? SpaceX designed redundancy into their system, while Russia built a single point of failure. This philosophy extends beyond infrastructure. It represents fundamentally different approaches to spaceflight, one rooted in Cold War urgency, the other in sustainable long-term operations. And the results speak for themselves. To understand why Dragon succeeded where Soyuz struggles, we need to revisit 1967. Cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov knew Soyuz 1 had over 200 documented issues: failed solar panels, malfunctioning guidance systems, critical design flaws. Even Yuri Gagarin volunteered to fly in his place, hoping Soviet leadership wouldn't risk their national hero. They launched anyway to commemorate Lenin's anniversary. The parachute failed during re-entry. Komarov's capsule slammed into Earth at terminal velocity and erupted in flames. He became the first human to die during spaceflight. Can you imagine the pressure Soviet engineers faced after that? Fix everything, but keep using the same basic design? 4 years later, Soyuz 11 successfully docked with Salyut 1. 3 cosmonauts, Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev, spent 23 days aboard, setting records. But during re-entry, explosive pyro bolts vibrated open a pressure valve at 168 kilometers altitude. The cabin depressurized instantly. All 3 suffocated within seconds. They remain the only humans to die in the vacuum of space. The capsule landed perfectly. Recovery crews opened the hatch to find 3 bodies. Compare that to May 30th, 2020. SpaceX's Demo 2 launched in 50% weather conditions, thunderstorms and heavy rain. Yet astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken reached the ISS smoothly after 22 hours. The return had one minor issue: parachutes deployed slightly lower than expected. But because Dragon uses ocean splashdown, both astronauts were unharmed. Since then, nearly 50 missions, 0 crew injuries, 0 cargo compromised. What's the difference? Soyuz took just 5 years from development to first crewed flight, driven by Cold War desperation. Dragon took 6 years, developed during peacetime with NASA partnership. 1 extra year bought generational advancement in safety. That's the power of building without wartime pressure. You can actually get it right. When Russian cosmonaut Anna Kikina flew on Crew 5, she didn't just praise Dragon politely. She called it much more comfortable than Soyuz, and specifically mentioned loving the touchscreen interface. For context, Soyuz still uses hundreds of physical buttons, switches, and levers with tiny displays. Docking relies on periscopes and manual controls. Dragon, mostly autopilot, Astronauts monitor touchscreens and can intervene if needed, but manual mode rarely activates. Training time drops dramatically. European Space Agency astronaut Andrei Kuipers once described Soyuz as cramped and tiny. The numbers confirm it. Soyuz seats 3 in a space designed in 1962. Dragon was built for 7, though NASA uses 4 for safety margins during splashdown. Even with 4, it's significantly roomier. But here's what really separates 21st century spacecraft from 1960s technology: the toilet situation. Yes, seriously. On Soyuz, astronauts wear adult diapers for the entire mission: launch, orbit, and landing. They're strapped in their seats for hours during ascent and descent. It's been standard procedure since the Soviet era. After a rough landing, they wait in those diapers until recovery teams arrive. Nobody enjoys it. Everyone endures it. Dragon has an actual toilet with vacuum system and privacy curtain, located near the cupola. During Inspiration 4, civilians called it the best view toilet in space: 360-degree views of Earth and stars while answering nature's call. Nicole Mann, the first Native American woman in space, shared something remarkable about Crew 5. When her team handed operations to Crew 6, she gave up her sleeping spot for the incoming crew. For about a week, she slept alone inside Dragon, using a bungee cord under the seat. She'd wake up, pull the window shades, sip coffee, and watch Earth's sunrise and sunset. Her words: "Very unique opportunity. One heck of a ride." Has any Soyuz cosmonaut ever described their spacecraft that way? Absolutely not. In 2003, Soyuz TMRA-1, carrying NASA astronauts Ken Bowersox and Don Pettit, plus Russian cosmonaut Nikolai Badarin, unexpectedly entered ballistic re-entry mode. The capsule landed 440 kilometers off target, the biggest deviation in Soyuz history. Russian officials initially blamed the crew for hitting the wrong button. The astronauts denied it. Official investigation later confirmed software error in the guidance system. This is what happens when you layer modern computers onto 60-year-old mechanical systems. Dragon was designed from scratch with integrated digital architecture. When Crew 2 had a leaking urine line in 2021, SpaceX didn't patch the old system. They redesigned the pipes with corrosion-resistant materials. When Crew 10 encountered fan and burst disk issues in 2025, fixes deployed immediately. Even Dmitry Rogozin, former Roscosmos head famous for criticizing SpaceX on Twitter, admitted in 2022 that Crew Dragon is reliable and safe enough to carry Russian cosmonauts. This from a man who spent years mocking Elon Musk publicly. Other Russian cosmonauts, Andrei Fedyaev, Konstantin Borisov, Alexander Gorbunov, described Dragon as modern, highly automated, and spacious. They avoided direct Soyuz comparisons, but their enthusiasm spoke volumes. Here's the ultimate proof. Despite escalating Russia-Ukraine tensions, Roscosmos and NASA agreed to continue seat swaps through at least 2027. Russian cosmonauts fly Dragon. American astronauts still ride Soyuz. If Dragon wasn't genuinely superior, Russia would have canceled this program immediately for political reasons alone. Continuing it proves they trust Dragon enough to stake their cosmonauts' lives on it. This isn't just about one spacecraft beating another. It's about what happens when you choose incremental upgrades over fundamental redesign. Nokia once dominated mobile phones. They kept refining the same basic platform while Apple built something entirely new. We know how that ended. Soyuz represents the Nokia strategy: reliable, proven, but fundamentally limited by its original 1962 architecture. No amount of software updates can overcome design decisions made before touchscreens existed, before modern material science, before we understood human factors in long-duration spaceflight. Dragon represents the iPhone moment in human spaceflight. Not just better, different, built around how astronauts actually need to work, rest, and live in space. So what was the perfect route to replace Soyuz? It wasn't about building a faster rocket or cheaper spacecraft. Musk understood something Russia missed. You can't upgrade your way out of a 60-year-old foundation. While Roscosmos kept patching Soyuz with new software and minor improvements, SpaceX started with a blank page. They asked, what would a spacecraft look like if we designed it today for today's astronauts? with today's technology? The answer was Dragon, touch screens instead of hundreds of buttons, autopilot instead of manual docking, actual bathrooms instead of diapers, and comfort instead of endurance. The most powerful evidence isn't the technology specs or safety records. It's Anna Kikina's smile when she praised Dragon. It's Dmitry Rogozin swallowing his pride to admit Dragon works. It's Russian cosmonauts choosing to fly American rather than wait for their own launch pad to be ready. Russia built Soyuz to win the space race. SpaceX built Dragon to make spaceflight sustainable. One was designed for Cold War desperation, the other for the future we're actually living in. The irony? Russia taught the world how to reach space reliably. Now they're learning from the student they once charged $90 million per seat. That's not just a business shift. It's a generational transition in human spaceflight. What do you think comes next for Roscosmos? Can they develop a true Dragon competitor, or is that era over? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. If this breakdown changed how you see the space industry, hit that like button and subscribe to Space Update 24 Hours for more deep dives into what's really happening beyond Earth. The space race isn't over. It's just being run by different players now. Elon Musk just confirmed what NASA officials have been quietly worrying about for months. While SpaceX races to make Starship ready for lunar missions, China is moving forward with surgical precision, and they might actually get there first. But here's what nobody's talking about. What happens when China plants their flag on the moon before America returns? Does it matter who wins this race, or are we all missing the bigger picture? Let's dive right in. On paper, America should win this race easily. NASA's Artemis 2 mission launches next year, sending astronauts around the moon. Artemis 3 follows in 2027 with the actual lunar landing. China says they'll land before 2030. 3 years behind, right? Not quite. At a recent congressional hearing, Jared Isaacman, Trump's nominee for NASA administrator, said something that should concern everyone. This is not the time for delay. If we fall behind, if we make a mistake, we may never catch up. Why would he say that if America's supposedly 3 years ahead? Because China keeps hitting their deadlines while NASA keeps missing theirs. Since 2004, China's launched 6 successful Chang'e missions, with Chang'e 6 returning samples from the moon's far side last year. Meanwhile, NASA originally planned to return humans to the moon by the end of 2024. That became 2025, then 2026. Now it's 2027. Maybe. Here's where it gets interesting. China's not just talking about landing on the moon. They're already building the hardware. In October, spokesperson Zhang Jingbo announced that major systems are complete. The Long March